英語学習に重要なのは、品質のフレーズを丸暗記することです。それにより、本当に重要な単語にだけ集中できます。この動画は、基礎練トレーニング。
By the time I arrive at the office, the meeting will have started. By the time I arrive at the office, the meeting will have started.
By the time I arrive at the office, the meeting will have started.
By the time we got to the airport, our flight had already left. By the time we got to the airport, our flight had already left.
By the time we got to the airport, our flight had already left.
By the time the food arrived, we were starving. By the time the food arrived, we were starving.
By the time the food arrived, we were starving.
By the time you finish this course, you will speak English fluently. By the time you finish this course, you will speak English fluently.
By the time you finish this course, you will speak English fluently.
By the time he was 20, he had visited 10 different countries. By the time he was 20, he had visited 10 different countries.
By the time he was 20, he had visited 10 different countries.
By the time they reached an agreement, it was midnight. By the time they reached an agreement, it was midnight.
By the time they reached an agreement, it was midnight.
By the time the rain stopped, the streets were flooded. By the time the rain stopped, the streets were flooded.
By the time the rain stopped, the streets were flooded.
By the time we got to the cinema, the movie had already started. By the time we got to the cinema, the movie had already started.
By the time we got to the cinema, the movie had already started.
By the time my parents come home, I will have cleaned the house. By the time my parents come home, I will have cleaned the house.
By the time my parents come home, I will have cleaned the house.
By the time the deadline comes, we will have completed the task. By the time the deadline comes, we will have completed the task.
By the time the deadline comes, we will have completed the task.
By the time I retire, I hope to have saved enough money. By the time I retire, I hope to have saved enough money.
By the time I retire, I hope to have saved enough money.
By the time she arrived, everyone had already left. By the time she arrived, everyone had already left.
By the time she arrived, everyone had already left.
By the time next year comes, the new building will be finished. By the time next year comes, the new building will be finished.
By the time next year comes, the new building will be finished.
By the time you get some experience, you will feel more confident. By the time you get some experience, you will feel more confident.
By the time you get some experience, you will feel more confident.
By the time it was our turn, the shop had closed. By the time it was our turn, the shop had closed.
By the time it was our turn, the shop had closed.
By the time I realized the mistake, the email had been sent. By the time I realized the mistake, the email had been sent.
By the time I realized the mistake, the email had been sent.
By the time he was 30, he had become a millionaire. By the time he was 30, he had become a millionaire.
By the time he was 30, he had become a millionaire.
By the time the technician arrived, the system was working again. By the time the technician arrived, the system was working again.
By the time the technician arrived, the system was working again.
By the time I remember her name, she will have gone. By the time I remember her name, she will have gone.
By the time I remember her name, she will have gone.
By the time I finish this book, I will have learned a lot. By the time I finish this book, I will have learned a lot.
By the time I finish this book, I will have learned a lot.
By the time the concert ended, it was raining hard. By the time the concert ended, it was raining hard.
By the time the concert ended, it was raining hard.
By the time we walk to the station, we will be tired. By the time we walk to the station, we will be tired.
By the time we walk to the station, we will be tired.
By the time you decide, the item might be out of stock. By the time you decide, the item might be out of stock.
By the time you decide, the item might be out of stock.
By the time the weekend comes, I'll be ready for a break. By the time the weekend comes, I'll be ready for a break.
By the time the weekend comes, I'll be ready for a break.
By the time the alarm goes off, I'm already awake. By the time the alarm goes off, I'm already awake.
By the time the alarm goes off, I'm already awake.
By the time we arrived, the party was over. By the time we arrived, the party was over.
By the time we arrived, the party was over.
By the time he was 20, he had traveled to 10 countries. By the time he was 20, he had traveled to 10 countries.
By the time he was 20, he had traveled to 10 countries.
By the time I finished the report, it was midnight. By the time I finished the report, it was midnight.
By the time I finished the report, it was midnight.
By the time I got home, everyone was asleep. By the time I got home, everyone was asleep.
By the time I got home, everyone was asleep.
By the time I reached the station, the train had left. By the time I reached the station, the train had left.
By the time I reached the station, the train had left.
By the time dinner was ready, he had already eaten. By the time dinner was ready, he had already eaten.
By the time dinner was ready, he had already eaten.
By the time I turn 30, I want to start a family. By the time I turn 30, I want to start a family.
By the time I turn 30, I want to start a family.
By the time we finish, the deadline will have passed. By the time we finish, the deadline will have passed.
By the time we finish, the deadline will have passed.
By the time the movie started, the theater was packed. By the time the movie started, the theater was packed.
By the time the movie started, the theater was packed.
By the time spring comes, the cherry trees will bloom. By the time spring comes, the cherry trees will bloom.
By the time spring comes, the cherry trees will bloom.
By the time class ended, I was exhausted. By the time class ended, I was exhausted.
By the time class ended, I was exhausted.
By the time we finalize the plan, it'll be too late. By the time we finalize the plan, it'll be too late.
By the time we finalize the plan, it'll be too late.
By the time I'm 40, I want to save yen. By the time I'm 40, I want to save yen.
By the time I'm 40, I want to save yen.
By the time the storm hit, we were safely indoors. By the time the storm hit, we were safely indoors.
By the time the storm hit, we were safely indoors.
By the time I woke up, breakfast was ready. By the time I woke up, breakfast was ready.
By the time I woke up, breakfast was ready.
今日もお疲れ様でした。一区切りついたら、温かい一杯を。